Hello, Eve.
Right.
Hello, everybody. We are very excited to be back for our second conscious conversation. I would first of all just like to say thank you very much for all the kind feedback and for everybody who's been in a co-creative conversation with us on various other platforms since the first video. For both of us, we felt very exposed in a way to actually just attempt something like this. So it was very encouraging and quite humbling to know that the agendaless effort we had actually did have some meaning. So thank you for that. I don't know if you want to say something as well, Eve.
Yeah, it was very beautiful to me how many people reached out and started new conversations. So we happened to record the one last week, but in the past week I've had maybe 6 or 7 other conversations with friends and going very deep into things. And I think that's almost the whole point, just let's just get talking with intention, creating that space and then seeing the ripple effects of that. So in some way it's beautiful because what we're doing is not special. Everyone can decide to step into that space of what happens if we connect consciously, if we really hold space for each other. So that's been beautiful, and it's fun to see how many people enjoy that.
Yes, I
Yeah.
totally agree. And I also had that incredible experience where even people that I had to check myself because it's also revealing my own judgments of being afraid to just be who I am. People that I thought would not respond to this at all came out of the so-called woodworks and really had a resonance with this. And that was almost the greatest gift of all, to realize that very often the boundaries is in our head, the ideas that we can only have certain conversations with certain people. And I really felt very grateful for that little puzzle that was unraveling in front of my eyes. That being said, obviously, the original conversation, I had a lot of time because of the lockdown in South Africa, but I guess around the world, people are more or less confined to a certain degree, to also reflect on what was coming up in that conversation, afterwards. And um, it basically took us a week to get back together, to feel ready, to feel like it's moving in us, that we feel there is a real need and a call to have a conversation today. However, on Wednesday night, after we had the first conversation on Tuesday last week, I was busy cooking dinner with my boyfriend and my daughter, and we love to listen to music when we make food. And then sometimes we go, do you remember this song? Do you remember that song? And then we were talking about Coldplay, the band, the very commercial mainstream band. And it was almost like somebody in the invisible realm shot an arrow into my head, because the lyrics of the song just starting, like, it moved through me with such exaltation, if that is even a way to describe something, that I immediately put the song on. And I love the song anyways, but it's almost like it's not really one of the well-known Coldplay songs. And then it was like the words of the song became a mantra for my entire week. Oh, there I go again. I get so emotional. And this morning, while I was in the shower, I allowed myself, because I'll read it to you now, right at the end. He goes through this, and I mean, even if you listen to the song, it's composed so brilliantly from a lyrical but also a melodical perspective, because it starts almost quite aggressively and with an attack, if you want to call it that, and then right towards the end there is this feeling of expansion and release. And if you hear the lyrics now, you will understand why I get so excited. It's from Coldplay's second album, called Rush of Blood to the Head. To give you an idea where we are in history, it's just straight after the 9/11 attacks. They actually produced this album around about 2002, it was released, and this is the first track on the album, and it's called Politic. I wish I could sing it. I guess I could, but I'm not going to go there today. I just want to read the lyrics. I might sing that last little bit because it's so incredible. It says, look at Earth from outer space. Everyone must find a place. Give me time and give me space. Give me real, don't give me fake. Give me strength, reserve control. Give me heart and give me soul. Give me time, give us a kiss. Tell me your own politic. And open up your eyes. Open up your eyes. Your eyes, open up your eyes. Open up your eyes. Give me one, 'cause one is best. In confusion, confidence. Give me peace of mind and trust. Don't forget the rest of us. Give me strength and reserve control. Give me heart, give me soul. Wounds that heal and cracks that fix. Tell me your politic. And then it repeats the chorus, but it ends with this incredible expansion after all of this. But give me love over love over love over this. And give me love over all of this.
Wow.
It's so beautiful. It goes, give me love over, love over, love over, love over this. Don't you just, can you feel that?
I've never listened to the song, but it's
Yeah.
really inspired lyrics. And it's so topical for me because I've been doing this meditation quote unquote challenge, which is just a funny way of saying that a friend of mine and I decided to share meditation experiences every evening. And 2 evenings, I think Wednesday and Thursday, the message that came through for me that really kind of settled into my mind was this idea of, firstly, authenticity. On Wednesday evening, it was about, how do we get through this, but also by implication life. How do you live was really the question. And I've gone through a lot of different politics or philosophies or spiritual paradigms in my life because I'm just curious about all of them. And it somehow always just settles back into authenticity when you remove all the concepts and the theories. It's about being with yourself in the moment and saying, what's true for me? What am I really feeling? What am I really experiencing? Even if that's confusion, then to be willing to share the confusion and not to be in a space where you have to figure it out and then share, or make up your mind and then share, or be confident and then share. We have this idea that we've got to be these perfect, figured out human beings before we can communicate. And I think what's beautiful about people is exactly the opposite. It's like no one really knows what to do with what's happening at the moment, and it's really difficult, and what's going to happen afterwards. And it isn't that what the connection is. It's, hey, let's be vulnerable and confused together. So yeah, I thought that was beautiful. And then the communication is the second step of that. It's living authentically, but then communicating with, as you said earlier, everyone. Why does it have to be like this message is okay for this person, that message is okay for that person? Why can't we just be fully human in every situation? So yeah, so I love these lyrics because that's really what I heard there as well.
Yes, and then to I think it was so amazing because for me, and I encourage people to go and listen to the song and read the lyrics by themselves. We'll find a way to post it in the thing. But it's that feeling of, I've been getting that feeling of pulling back and looking at things from a wider perspective, but then to realize it actually doesn't even matter, because when we surrender in authenticity, when we don't try to be something that we're not in the moment, like you just said, he says, give me real, don't give me fake, you know, give me strength and reserve control. Like there's so much in that once we allow ourselves to go into that vulnerable space, I, for myself, and I've been working with that all week, realize that we're actually always, in whatever way we're busy experiencing life, asking for love. You know? And not the kind of love that is written about on Valentine's cards. I'm talking about that incredible force that is everything from what I believe and understand to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really saying that we're asking for acceptance, isn't it? It's like, here am I, here's who I am. Are you going to accept that or reject it? And that, that give me real, it's hard because of course we're conflicted beings and we have these opposite tensions, and we very much believe that we're imperfect. And so it's terrifying to be real. And I think it's something to be gentle with ourselves about as well. It's like, in little steps, be as real as you can be in this moment, and forgive yourself when you're not able to, and just look at why, because there's a good reason also why it is so difficult for us, and judging ourselves because of that makes it harder. So it's almost like, okay, let me try and give a little bit more of myself in every moment to every person,
I love that.
and just hold space for the emotions that come up, which will be fear, vulnerability, and as you said, it's a call for love, which is a phrase from A Course in Miracles, as you know, as well.
Yes. And to add to that from A Course in Miracles perspective, and I don't think it's necessary to even go down that, like, what is that about? I mean, people can go and figure that out for themselves if it's something that touches you in the moment when we talk about it. But I said to Gerard this morning, my partner, you know, what I'm really starting to integrate from the course is, it doesn't matter how many times you forget who you really are, that you really are perfect. What matters is that you, once you forget, come back and remember. Come back and remember. It's okay if you lose track. It's okay if you get overwhelmed. It's okay if you get depressed. It's okay if you screw up and if you lose your temper, or if you feel that this is too much, or maybe all of this is just nonsense. What is important, and that's what I've been processing, is that to remember there is not a limit on how many times you can come back to remembering that you're actually good enough just as you are, even when you thought you were not.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of when I was doing my Vipassana meditation training. The teacher at the front would almost consistently every now and then just say, just start again. I know that you've forgotten. I know that you were daydreaming. That's fine. That's how the mind works. But in this moment, you have an opportunity to start again. Just start the meditation from scratch. Like, oh, it's my intention to be present. It's my intention to be peaceful. And as you said, there's an infinite resource. You can always come back.
Yes.
And what I'm always grateful for is, in a certain sense, that moment where you remember that you can come back, you've already come back, right? That awareness is already kind of a gift that you're given. So it's almost as though we don't really even need to do that. It's not an effort. It's more just allowing that moment and staying in it, and embracing it and being appreciative when it comes.
Yes, and that ties in automatically with the deep notion of forgiveness, because it's almost like the gap between the moments become quite narrow or smaller once you understand that there is actually nothing to really forgive. It's okay, just go back. Because I find that often my big challenge was, oh my word, that was wrong. I screwed up. I'm not supposed to think like that. I'm not supposed to talk like that. And then I get caught in this judgment of me being at fault. And then it is creating this lag, this wasting time where I could actually just go, oops, let me start again. Oops, let me start again. Oops, oops, sorry. Oops, I'll just start again.
Yeah.
And it's like you said with the Vipassana teacher going, it's okay, you can just start again. But I think there is a shortcut with that, and that is to know that you have access to instant forgiveness for yourself and everyone else, because there is actually nothing to forgive.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what I love about the idea of forgiveness in this sense, um, which is more the way that A Course in Miracles uses it, and it's the same as what you were saying about love earlier. It's really just about allowing and accepting yourself as you are, that process that you're going through. It's always interesting when we say that, you are perfect as you are. When I was younger, I used to really sort of rebel against that idea because, like clearly you can improve or grow, and even improve and grow in things that really matter to you, like being more peaceful, being more loving. But I've kind of over time settled into the understanding that saying you're perfect as you are means that the process that you're going through is perfect as it is.
Hmm.
Like at the moment, maybe there's judgment or fear or anger coming up, but that is perfect as well. And it won't be forever. It arises, and if you allow it, it'll pass away. In fact, if you resist it, it'll stay longer than it would have otherwise stayed, right? In some sense, the best thing you can do is to allow the anger, allow the fear, and be mindful with that. Honor it, give it space, love and accept that as well. Not to say that you're perfect as an angry person, but to say that you're not an angry person. You're just experiencing anger temporarily. And I think that's been quite helpful to me. It's like, okay, here the emotion comes, and then there it goes, and I allow it to come, and I allow it to go.
That's
Rumi has a beautiful poem about that, which I won't try and recite, but something about emotions being like guests in our house. He says, if they come to your door, just let them in, and then they'll eventually leave again. So we can link to that as well. That's a beautiful poem. I haven't read that in a few years.
Oh, please, let's link that. And I cannot agree with you more. I remember when we were much younger, because we've known each other for a very long time. I think, I don't want to give away our humble age, but it's more than 20 years. I must, in the early 20s, there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of identification with emotion, for various helpful purposes at that point. But you told me that at one point you said, remember that don't identify with the emotion, rather see it as a guest visiting you. And since that day, it's been so helpful in my life as well. I'm going to be a liar if I say I always remember it in the moment, but at least I've come to a point where once I realize I am not supposed to feel like I am only this thing, I am merely being visited, or this is around, or this is part of the experience, it also immediately becomes more bearable.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that phase of merging with the emotion and then coming back out of it, sort of forgetting who we are. I think that's also natural, and in some sense, the work is also just to forgive that. I still experience that. This morning, I switched on the news, and for a few moments, I felt really terrified again. It's like, what's happening in the world? The UK Prime Minister is in the ICU, and then okay, that fear is natural. I don't have to merge with it. So I think that's also fine. It's not a competition to see how enlightened we can be.
What I love,
Just,
and I have to say it, you once told me, and I mean, we don't have enough time to go into how we got to that particular point in the conversation, but you once told me, and it gave me such incredible comfort, that we are all already enlightened. We are merely revising it, remembering how we got to that point, right? Am I remembering correctly what you told me? And
probably said.
and now that you're saying it's not a race, it is so comforting to know that, as you said earlier as well, in every moment, everything is serving us for that particular moment. If we can just try and find a way to be in that moment with whatever is in front of us, which is not always
Right.
easy.
It's really difficult, and what I'm learning at the moment is that sharing that intention and those thoughts with others helps strengthen that awareness. When we try to keep it for ourselves and keep it private, which I did for a long time, not really talking to anyone except maybe you and one or two others about just consciousness or intentionality. And it seems really now that we're being asked to just connect with others about that, to really communicate and share and ask questions and engage, because I think that somehow it resonates with the truth that we are connected. We don't have to hide ourselves from each other, because fundamentally we're all human and we experience the same emotions, the same fears, the same sense of being separate from God. And I believe that separation is a false perception, and kind of the way in which we remember that is by connecting, which sort of makes sense, right? That if we're connected, then connecting is the way that we remember that that's already the case.
Yeah, that sounds
Um,
very logical. And yet we struggle so much with that as humans, because I think most of the time we are completely irrational in the way we approach most things. And if we um, it's that beautiful image of I like the image of being in a car, and once A Course in Miracles really started to kick in for me, I'm a very visual person. I had to use images to help me ground the information, because it's quite overwhelming in the beginning. And I just imagine every time I'm really intentionally engaging with the teaching, with the guidance, let's call it guidance, I like the word guidance more than teaching, was to imagine that there is a car, and that the Holy Spirit opens the back door for me, and I get onto the back seat, and he closes the door and he gets into the front seat and he's like, "Are you ready?" And I'm like, "Cannot wait." And there we go. And we are still moving through life, and we are still experiencing the journey. But I don't have that pressure of being in the front seat. And I, in fact, have a better chance of actually of connecting, of seeing, of observing, of feeling, of experiencing whatever it is that I'm going to experience in that day, if I relinquish that control. If I go, okay, someone else can take the seat can take the steer, for a moment.
yeah, so it's surrendering to kind of that deeper knowing, that deeper process. It's interesting. It reminds me now of, I think I mentioned this to you last week, maybe not in the recording, but in the Gospel of Thomas, there's a short quote by Jesus, which I really love. I think it's not in the Bible, it's in the Gospel of Thomas, where he says, if you bring forth what is within you, then what is within you will save you. And I like that a lot, because it's sort of saying, don't look to society or other people or expectations to decide who you should be. Look really into your heart and feel what feels right. What feels right to say now, what feels right to do now. And I truly believe that all people have this incredibly pure core to them. We get confused very easily as humans. We get very scared. And then we behave in ways that certainly don't make it appear as though we're good. But I believe that's really just fear. When we get scared, we behave in a disconnected way.
Yes.
And we luckily have the choice to go back inside and start putting forth what is within instead of grasping onto what is without and judging ourselves for that. And it's always beautiful when you remember that, because it's much easier, as you said. Just get in the back seat and allow it to happen. Don't be so much the driver of the whole thing.
Yes, and I mean, I guess maybe it's obvious, but just to make sure, I'm not saying that I'm not taking action in my life. I'm not saying that I'm not this blob on the big ocean of existence, not doing anything. I think what I'm trying to say is to just tie in with what you just so beautifully reminded me of is that it is in the allowance that you hear the next step and then you take action. Very often we live our lives in taking the step, realizing that was really not a good idea, looking up to God, going, what am I supposed to do now? And then God is like, you could have asked me before you took the step, you know? And not in a judgmental way. You will always go, okay, now you can just do that or that. But to make it easier, to have less suffering, to have less anxiety, to have less fear, maybe it's back again to being authentic, just admitting that being human basically puts you in a constant state of panic. So instead of trying to hide that, rather just go, hi, I'm going to take a step now. I would really like some input. So let's, not waste time. And to add to what you just said, there was another thing that came through very strongly in this week for me about, I think, the time where one size or one piece of advice or one trajectory or one theory or one teaching is going to fit all is done. I have a feeling that notion, and we touched on this in the first conversation as well, that we have to go deep within, connect to that core that you were talking about, to get the guidance as to what is the next step for me in whatever it is, will allow an incredible revolution of God showing himself, herself, itself to the world. Because for too long we've been too afraid to go, this is how I experience God. This is how I feel love. This is how I remember who I am. Because we thought that is wrong, or maybe people will judge us, or maybe that is going to, cause us to eventually end up somewhere where we would burn forever. And now I look around and I see people are doing it instinctively. They've stopped and taken a pause, and they're starting to trust that inner relationship with the divine, with God, whatever you want to call it. And from that, I believe incredible, not just change, but peace can come.
Yeah, I think that's really what's beautiful to me about what you've just said. Is it's also the recognition that the language doesn't really matter. One of the things that I'm very grateful for is that I did, for some reason, as a child, have this incredibly curious mind, and so I was just reading everything. Um, and over time, it became clear to me that everyone is kind of saying the same thing. Some people frame it in a way that includes a concept of God, and some people frame it in a way that completely excludes that concept. And yet, everyone is aware of this sort of presence of love and authenticity and connection and truth. Like, those things are self-evidently good for us. They're self-evidently who we are. And I call that God because that's the metaphor that I grew up in, and I like it. But at other times, I haven't called it God. Some people see it in nature, and it's a more shamanic perspective, or some people see it in music and it's a more artistic perspective. And I was actually chatting with one of my friends last night about this idea that there are so many forms in which we can experience God. And I remember when I was quite young, one of the stories from Hinduism that I really enjoyed, and I may be remembering it wrong, but this is what stuck with me, is that God is a bit like the sun, and the world is like these thousands of clay pots, each one different shapes, different colors, filled with water. And then on the surface of each of these pots, we see the sun reflected, and we look in this pot and we see, oh, God is in this pot, or God is in that pot. But it's really just a reflection of something much higher, much bigger. And I've always enjoyed that. And it allows me to listen to anyone and try and translate what they're saying through their language, and not take offense at some word that they've used that for me means something else, because then I would just be misunderstanding them. Like, if we're all one and we're all connected to God, then everyone has that, and you're just listening wrong, you know?
You're so right. And I remember we used to do that from a very conscious perspective when we were youngsters at varsity. We would go to the student church, and even although the immediate dogma did really not interest us, the two of us would walk out of that particular service and start to really process the information in a way that we could understand whatever the message was supposed to be that day. And I still remember being at a very particular point in my journey, finding those moments where you almost force yourself to not judge and not fall into that trap, but to rather use everything as a script to interpret and to get to the essence of what is actually wanting to be communicated. Because if we do that with intention, there is almost no way that you cannot hear the voice of God in any of these particular, I call it roads up the mountain. We're all on our way up the mountain, and there are many paths, you know. Wow, I'm amazed at how we got to this. We are on our way up the mountain. Do you have any last thoughts for today? I really enjoyed this wonderful conversation.
Yeah, it's the phrase that sticks in my mind right now is really, God is everywhere, and if you don't see him, you're just not looking correctly. So hold space, hold space for what's coming up, because I think it's in the absence of judgment that we are able to start seeing God or spirit or truth or love, or whichever word that you prefer to use. So yeah, thank you for holding space. It's always beautiful to see what comes up.
And thank you for being here with me. And to everyone out there, yeah, just one day at a time, one moment at a time. And something that's coming in now in my ear that's so important that I'll have to say it is, we should not lose our sense of humor in all of this. I find that to laugh and to find things that make me laugh in this time, really, it's almost like it blasts open the heart in order to see God again. It's not always this struggle or the seriousness, or you have to go into a quiet space to see the face of God. Sometimes in those moments when you're completely rolling on the floor for something ridiculous, it changes the lens, and then we can see again with new eyes.
That's beautiful. It might be a good time to rewatch the movie Patch Adams with Robin Williams.
Ah, yes. Or Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. On that note, we leave you, and we're going to try our best to do a live video next week. I've sat with that a little bit, and maybe we can reflect before we make a final decision, but I think it will be really nice if we can maybe just have people join us and then ask questions, and we can be in a more we can be together in a more collaborative space. But for now, this is us, and thank you.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye.